Hello and welcome. I'm James Zimohan. You're watching A News. First, the headlines. The US is launching what it calls an economic D-Day against Iran, as Tehran threatens to stop oil exports from the Gulf. European leaders are in Kyiv to join Ukraine in celebrating its Independence Day. And Syria and Israel have held US-mediated talks in Jordan, seeking to de-escalate tensions after recent Israeli strikes. Now, the United States and Iran have exchanged new threats as Washington prepares to announce what it calls the largest financial pressure campaign ever imposed on Tehran.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is expected to unveil additional economic sanctions targeting Iran and countries that continue trading with it later today. The measures come as Iran warns it could halt all oil exports from the Gulf if what it calls an economic war continues. Iranian official Mohsen Rezai said Tehran would not allow a single drop of oil to be exported through the Strait of Hormuz or anywhere in the Persian Gulf if economic pressure increases. He also warned that countries supporting U.S. sanctions could be viewed as participating in an act of war. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi dismissed the threat of the new measures, calling them a sign of desperation. He described them as a continuation of what he called Washington's maximum pressure policy and urged the United States to pursue dialogue instead. This is a repetitive scenario, from the crippling sanctions imposed during the Obama administration to the maximum pressure campaign during Mr. Trump's first administration, and now to the latest sanctions. All of these measures have been introduced under different titles, but they represent the same kind of bullying that we have always seen in American policy. Meanwhile, Iran's state-controlled Persian Gulf Strait Authority has warned that vessels accused of violating its transit rules in the Strait of Hormuz could face penalties, including fines, detention, or confiscation. Fewer than 20 commodity vessels transited the narrow waterway over the weekend, according to shipping data, as Iranian and US restrictions continue to limit traffic through the key energy route. It remains one of the world's most important oil transit corridors, with at least 20% to 25% of global energy shipments passing through it. The latest developments come as Tehran and Washington remain locked in a broader confrontation, with diplomatic efforts showing little progress.
Iran has ruled out the visit by Pakistan's army chief as part of mediations between Tehran and Washington. Tehran says talks with Asim Munir will instead focus on issues of mutual interest between the two neighboring countries, as well as regional developments.
Iran's foreign ministry has rejected reports that Pakistan's army chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir's visit to Tehran will be about mediation with the United States. Spokesman Ismail Baghai stressed at a weekly press conference on Monday that the trip follows an agenda on fostering bilateral cooperation as well as discussing the latest regional developments. He said that the status of navigation at the Strait of Hormuz is also on the agenda because of Pakistan's interest in the strategic waterway, being a littoral state at the Sea of Oman. The Iranian official also welcomed Bulgaria's move to withdraw U.S. military aircraft tankers from its territory following Tehran's protest to Sofia. When asked about remarks by the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian suggesting an end to the war would be when Iran is at the best position, the spokesman said his statement did not mean accepting Washington's conditions. He added that the newly formed trilateral security pact between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey shows there is serious concern in the region over Israeli and U.S. policies in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Baghai confirmed that several signatories had approached Tehran for joint security arrangements in the region. The foreign ministry spokesman also ruled out reports that the Strait of Hormuz is open to traffic. Turaj Shiralilu from Iranian Foreign Ministry for A News.
Now let's bring in Farhat Asif, president of the Institute of Peace and Diplomatic Studies, join us from Islamabad, Pakistan. Good to have you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, James.
All right, now, Iran's currency has fallen another record low as the U.S. tightens economic pressure. How much strain can the Iranian economy take before it starts changing Tehran's calculations?
Thank you so much, Jens. At this point in time, this is a very important question about Iran's economy. Since the start of war, I've been witnessing and looking at how this entire economic aspect of this war and on Iran, especially on sanctions. As you remember that when there was a bizarre resistance from the local marketeers, people who were selling and buying in Tehran, there was a lot of huge uproar about the economic sanctions and, of course, the challenges. Looking at after nearly a year, almost these entire months, and more than that, what I'm seeing is that the rial has completely fallen. I mean, in comparison to how the U.S. dollar has, taken the shape. And of course, as the recent action, we have witnessing that how the inflation has also, disrupted trade. Revenues are declining. Of course, the oil revenues, and nearly 6 months since this entire conflict has risen to a much higher level. This has produced a lot of pressure on the thresholds on the state, and that's why one of the reasons for Iran to coming on the table is also the fact that how they are looking for a breaking point where they can be able to have a negotiation with the other party, and primarily the role of Pakistan as well. And IMF has also recently shared that Iran's economy will also be contracting with the 5%. And over the time period, the critical question here is whether Iran will be able to bear this pressure, or how will this entire process, or especially as the negotiation of between both the countries, and of course through the mediation, Pakistan has coming to the point where there was a 60 days of point of getting the negotiation done. Various important aspects should be done. What are the suggestions coming, or what are the further points taken by Tehran regarding this being shown this flexibility? And I see that as today our CDF, our Chief of Defense Force, is in Tehran. One of the probability is that there will be negotiation on how conversations regarding how the negotiation could go forward, and also the aspect of how Iran will be joining a strategic and trilateral aspect where recently Mecca agreement has happened between the countries where Pakistan is an important actor, and how Tehran will be looking at how to resolve this economic pressure building on because of the geopolitical. So the geoeconomic factor is the one that is keeping Iran going on this aspect of negotiation in this conflict.
Now, speaking about geoeconomic factors, Iran is warning countries around it not to cooperate with the new U.S. measures. Could Tehran's response put some of its neighbors in an impossible position?
Yeah, I believe on this question, because there will be challenges for the regional countries, because economic interdependence amongst the countries is phenomenal. Of course, at this point in time, and the alignment of the region is that where they are having this kind of alignment on geopolitics, geostrategic, and geoeconomics. At the same time, the section will impact not only the Iranian regime, Iranian infrastructure, Iranian economic infrastructure, but it will also impact those who allies, or maybe who are currently in negotiation. For example, in Pakistan, or for example, for those countries who are currently having trade with Iran, or trying to build up. And of course, danger will be that there will be economic decisions or that are linked with security decisions, which is primarily where the delinking or linking will happen. And I see that a government which is complying with Washington maybe view this entire gambit or the statement coming from Iran in a very cautious manner. And of course, it will also challenge how Tehran is looking at release of their economic pressure. But at the same time, when you're threatening your allies or those people who are helping you at the same time, might be a challenge. So it's a very complex kind of situation that we are witnessing at this point in time, where we are looking for de-escalation of the entire conflict. But at the same time, there's a choice given by Iran if you're choosing us or choosing the US. But at the same time, if you look at the global economic infrastructure, we cannot choose one side or another.
Now, Iran has now threatened dozens of tankers with fines, detention, or even cargo seizures. Is Tehran using Hormuz mainly as leverage, or is control of the strait becoming a goal in itself?
This is a very interesting question. When I look at this entire scenario, I see that how we need to distinguish between how Iran is looking at permanently controlling Strait of Hormuz, or the Iran is looking at how they are using the influence over Strait of Hormuz to change the negotiation question. At present, the interpretation about how the use of influence over Hormuz to change the entire negotiation process and posture, I think that Iran is threatening dozens of vessels, and this threat, believe you me, when I was looking, kind of analyzing and closely watching this entire conflict, I've been witnessing this entire time. To be honest, not now, but of course, since the state of the conflict, not only from Iran but also from the U.S. at the same time. But looking at and speaking about Iran, Hormuz gives Iran something which is very much, kind of economic leverage, and the sanctions that are putting there cannot be easily removed if Iran is controlling Hormuz, and it is only giving Iran a geographical leverage, not economic, kind of leverage that they can put onto. So it's a tug of war between the people, between the countries, of course, with Iran, of course, who are supporting them, and of course, Washington is restricting oil exports, banking transactions, and international trade, and everything that is linked to Hormuz. And this is creating a lot of cost for not only Tehran but also for economic global energy and economic system. That makes shipping access very much challenging at the same time. And this is a very extraordinary instrument that Iran is benching on. But at the same time, as you must have seen, that they had attempts to institutionalize fees, unilateral shipping. They had made a lot of structures inside, and that's why I think that distinction is important to make.
All right.
How important it is for Iran and for the region.
All right, now finally, Ms. Asif, and briefly as well. Now, Pakistan's army chief has arrived in Tehran after speaking with Trump. Does his involvement suggest the regional diplomatic effort still has room to grow, or is this becoming a very narrow channel?
I think that at this point in time, this is important as well. Again, a very important question. Our army chief is there, and as you have witnessed that there, his presence, his conversations with Trump, which is directly personal and very much important. I think that this is not only a narrow chance, because at the same time, both sides are exhausted. Both sides are not, if you look at the statements coming from Iran, from Tehran, from Washington, and from the regional countries, they're exhausted with this war, because exhaustion is not only geostrategic but at the same time economic, which is very much a very important aspect that these countries are looking at. And Pakistan, through its mediation, of course, the impact of the economy or tensions in the Middle East has created a lot of challenge for Pakistan's economy as well. Trade is, of course, challenging, so role of Pakistan is important. And at this point in time, when our Mr. Asim Munir is there, I think it's not only narrow, but it's also coming to a point where there will be a resolution or kind of a compromise from all sides that we'll be making. After Makkah agreement, where the attack, one of the important is kind of a NATO, that Article 5 kind of NATO is impacted there. There's an article that it does attack any other country, there will be attack from all of us, on all of us, because as a result, there is a high level of chance that this entire conversation from Mr. Munir and of course counterparts there in Tehran, and before, to be honest, to be shared with you that before traveling, Foreign Minister of Iran has also spoken twice with our Foreign Minister. I think that these conversations will be leading to a culmination, and there's a high probability that Iran will be coming to the tables with the neighboring countries based on how the entire global or regional power dynamics will be settling in.
Thank you. That was Houthis Saudi, President of the Institute of Peace and Diplomatic Studies, joining us from Islamabad, Pakistan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Now, Oman's foreign minister is traveling to Tehran on Tuesday for high-level talks with Iranian officials. Bahri Houthis Saudi will meet his Iranian counterpart, Abbas Araghchi, to discuss bilateral ties and regional issues. Iran's foreign ministry says the visit is part of ongoing political consultations between the two nations. Both countries are littoral states of the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Tehran says the diplomatic push is aimed at bolstering peace and stability across the region. Now, oil prices fell by more than $1 a barrel on Monday ahead of an expected U.S. announcement on new sanctions against Iran. The drop comes as investors took profits following 2 consecutive weeks of gains. Brent crude dropped 1.3% to around $93 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate fell about 1.4% to nearly $86. Both benchmarks gained more than 5% last week as stalled talks between Washington and Tehran added to concerns over oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Syria and Israel have held high-level U.S.-mediated talks in Jordan, focusing on halting Israeli strikes on Syrian territory and reviving negotiations on a security agreement. Damascus is demanding that Israeli forces withdraw to positions held before the 8th of December 2024 and that the 1974 disengagement agreement be fully restored. The two sides also discussed ways to prevent tensions between Israel and Turkey from spilling over into Syrian territory. Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shabani said security talks are expected to resume soon. However, he said mistrust between the two sides remain. All right, after the break, we'll take a look at the latest in the Russian-Ukraine war after a drone attack on Krasnodar killed 2 children. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, drone debris hit a private childcare center in Russia's southern city of Krasnodar. 2 children were killed and 9 others were injured. The attack also sparked a major fire at an Amzan logistics hub in the city.
A drone attack in Makhachkala, Dagestan has triggered a fire at Russia's online retailer Ozon's logistics hub. The company said it had also temporarily suspended operations at 2 warehouses in the nearby regions of Stavropol and Adygea amid a drone attack alert. Ozon said the facilities were not damaged. Meanwhile, debris from a drone attack has hit a private childcare center in Russia's southern city of Krasnodar, killing 2 children. 9 other people were injured, including 7 youngsters. Regional Governor Veniamin Kondratyev said the incident happened overnight. Debris also fell on residential buildings while fires broke out at warehouses in the city, including at Russia's online retailer Ozon at its logistics hub. The company said that operations have been suspended. In Russia's Stavropol region, a drone attack on an industrial area in the city of Nevinomysk was repelled, according to Regional Governor Vladimir Vladimirov. Meanwhile, over in Ukraine, a Russian attack on the outskirts of Kharkiv killed 3 people, according to the regional governor. Russian President Vladimir Putin has described Ukraine's strikes on Russian economic targets as the opening of Pandora's box. He said Moscow would respond by targeting Ukraine's most sensitive economic sectors. The comment comes as Ukraine steps up its attacks on logistics hubs and warehouses across Russia, targeting infrastructure it says supports Moscow's war effort. Meanwhile, Kyiv seeks additional air defense interceptor missiles from the United States and Europe to strengthen its air defense capabilities. On Monday, Russia's defense ministry said that it had launched a Soyuz rocket carrying a spacecraft for defense purposes. According to the ministry, the Soyuz 2.1B rocket lifted off from the Plesetsk cosmodrome in northern Russia. The ministry did not provide further details about the spacecraft or its mission.
Now, Ukraine is turning its wartime drone experience into longer-term defense partnerships, including a new production deal with Norway. The agreement covers joint projects in unmanned systems and defense technology, with plans for production facilities outside Ukraine. Kyiv's drone deal now includes more than 20 partners, among them 15 NATO members under 10-year agreements. Norway says it will add $9.2 billion in new aid next year, further expanding its support. Ukraine is ruling out any alternative to NATO membership as President Volodymyr Zelensky presses for firm security guarantees. He said NATO membership would bring Ukraine more funding and closer defense ties. Zelensky says Kyiv needs 30 billion euros in EU loans this year, plus $27 billion for defense. He also says the diplomatic window could last until next summer, but Russia remains unwilling to end the war while Kyiv holds the Donbass. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv had no role in the explosions that damaged the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea in 2022. The blasts hit Nord Stream 1 and 2 in September 2022, disrupting pipelines built to carry Russian gas to Germany. 2 Ukrainian nationals are now in custody over suspected involvement. Zelensky repeated Ukraine's denial after a Baltic Nordic summit in Kyiv as an international investigation into the explosions continues.
Ukraine has never officially taken part in any operations regarding the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The issue is not whether someone wants something or not. There is an investigation, and it is currently underway.
Now, European leaders have arrived in Kyiv to join Ukraine's Independence Day celebration, marking 35 years since the country regained independence from the Soviet Union.
Ukraine wants peace, but will not just give in to Russia at any price, President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a defiant speech marking Independence Day celebrations. Joining him at the anniversary were European Council President Antonio Costa, UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham, Luxembourg Prime Minister Luc Frieden, as well as Moldovan President Maia Sandu and Estonian President Alar Karis to the Ukrainian capital. Costa said his visit demonstrates the European Union's unwavering support for Ukraine, adding that the country's struggle is also Europe's struggle. Zelensky also highlighted the role of the country's defense industry, saying it has become a key pillar in strengthening Ukraine's independence. Our naval drones are in action. The enemy had a fleet, and now it is turning into scrap metal. But we must sink more. Our mid-range strikes are cutting their logistics. Our long-range capabilities are cutting their profits. Zelensky said Ukrainian strikes have reached locations including Moscow, Tula, as well as Ryazan, Olenia, and Omsk, adding that Ukraine needs to expand these capabilities further. He also said the Flamingo long-range missiles should become mass-produced rather than a rare weapon. Zelensky also called for stronger pressure on Russia, saying Washington should impose sanctions that would force Moscow to end the war and provide Ukraine with the necessary support. During the visit, Britain is expected to announce the release of classified information on British-made components used in Storm Shadow cruise missiles. The move could help Ukraine establish domestic production of the French-designed Scalp version of the weapon, with Kyiv and Paris aiming to launch a production line by the end of the year. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reaffirmed Washington's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. However, envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner postponed their planned visit after Russian missile and drone strikes on Kyiv last week.
Now, the EU has approved 61 billion euros in new defense funding for Ukraine as Kyiv presses for more support to meet its financial and security needs. The package will cover air defense systems, missiles, ammunition, and radars. But President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv still needs 30 billion euros in EU loans this year to cover its budget gap, plus another $27 billion for defense. He also rules out an alternative to NATO membership. Now, Kazakhstan's first vote for its new parliament has produced a strong early lead for the pro-presidential Adalet party as the country prepares for a major change to its political system. Fraser Kalmaziner has more.
5 political parties are projected to enter Kazakhstan's new Kurultai, according to preliminary results released by the Central Election Commission. Adelaide is leading with nearly 72% of the vote, far ahead of the other parties. Adelaide is a new pro-presidential party formed earlier this year. It was later joined by Amanat, previously Kazakhstan's largest political party. Parties need at least 5% of the vote to enter parliament. Turnout was just over 74%, with more than 9.3 million people voting. There are still preliminary figures. The Central Election Commission is expected to announce the final results within 10 days of the vote. Meanwhile, international observers described the Kurultai elections as fair and open, saying they found no violations that could have affected their results.
We observed the process. According to our observations, all the conditions and all aspects of the process were transparent. Most importantly, no one put any pressure on us. We visited 10 polling stations in Almaty. In the evening, we also observed the vote counting process. No violations of the law were identified.
We would also like to highlight the 30% quota for women within the political party system, as well as the quota for an inclusive society. I personally believe this is a very positive development. Overall, all the necessary conditions have been provided at polling stations for people with disabilities. In general, the electoral process was organised at a very high level.
The Kurultai will have 145 lawmakers elected through party lists for 5-year terms. But this election is about more than a new parliament. Kazakhstan is also changing the structure of its political system. The previous 2-chamber parliament is being replaced by a single-chamber Kurultai, which will have a greater role in key government decisions and in holding the government to account. The new Kurultai will have a bigger say in key appointments, including the Prime Minister, Vice President, and members of the Constitutional Court. It will also have stronger powers to oversee the government, including the ability to express no confidence in individual ministers. That makes the role of the Speaker particularly important, as legislative power will now be concentrated in a single chamber. And once the Kurultai begins its work, the current government must step down within 2 months of the first session. The president must also appoint the vice president, a position restored under the amended constitution with the parliament's approval. Fariza Kalimurzana, Almaty, A News.
All right, let's bring in Nurbulat Nishambayev, professor at Turan University, join us from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Good to have you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, now, the Adalet party has won more than 71% of the vote in preliminary results. What does such a strong result tell us about the political mood in Kazakhstan?
Well, Kazakhstan yesterday had a polls on Kurultai. The Adalet party became as a forerunner, getting, according to the latest exit poll, over the 70% vote. But still, we are waiting for the official results from the Central Election Commission. But one of the reasons why Adalet got so much vote, I think, because it's a program, the first one. The second, it's a team. So regardless, being established in April, just a couple of months ago, Adalet was able to create a wide range of members. It has around more than 1 million members, and it has the strongest institutional support. I mean, the chambers and youth groups, all the spheres. The second is Adalet party comparing with the other 6 parties, was able to bring their program to every single voters in the language of excellent political communication. So we should remember that Adliyat was used to call before this one as a Amanat parties, as a leading parties. So therefore all those, the quality of their programs and the strong support of their members and having the biggest institutional form helped them to get a majority of the seat from the parliament we call Kurultai. So usually in the Kazakhstani political system, exit poll and official results will be more or less the same in our practice. So therefore, I think tomorrow the Central Election Commission will declare the final result of the election. So therefore, the exit poll results will be pretty similar with the official. It's from my perspective.
All right.
The second reason is it's a political aspects. Adliyat Party, when it was established in April, they declared themselves as a centrist parties who wants to offer equal opportunity regardless the color of skin, regardless place of birth to all citizens. Also, they try to bring up the law. It should be above all. So equality under the law, it was their slogans. The translation of the word adlet itself means as a fairness. So therefore, I think this is centrist parties coming to power in Kazakhstan.
All right, thank you, Professor. Now, this is the first election for Kazakhstan's new single-chamber Kurultai, as you already just mentioned. How different could this parliament be from the previous system?
Well, since first day of independence, we used to have bicameral parliaments. It's a two chambers under Majlis and Upper Senate. But from this year, according to our latest constitution, Kazakhstan is adopting unicameral parliament. The first reason and the differences, I think, it's the members of it. The members of legislative body, it increased from 98 to 145. Now, unicameral chamber has 145. The second is, for the first time in the history of Kazakhstan, for election for Kurultai, it was a election among the political parties. So people voted for political parties according to their program, and each party offered their own candidates. Now, how many seats they will get from Kurultai, accordingly they will offer their own candidates for the Kurultais. So therefore, the main differences of the new political institution, let's say it's a unicameral, I think for long term, for Kazakhstan country with a sovereign and the country has a strong administrative system. So this is unicameral parliament, unicameral Kurultai helps to accelerate to adopting a new laws and working on this sphere. Because prior last year we used to have bicameral parliaments. Usually it took a longer time to accept a constitution, at least to consider it at the legislative level.
Now, finally, Professor, the results is expected to strengthen Tokayev's position. What does that mean for the balance of power inside Kazakhstan?
So that's a very interesting question. The most important political change took place on 15th of March in 2026. So we have accepted a new constitution as a result of referendum. According to the latest and the newest constitutions, the balance of power among judiciary and legislative and high court is equalized. So we have to make sure that after getting new forms of parliament, a Kurultai, according to the constitution, we have a new political institution we call the vice president. So therefore, the huge support of any parties will not give extra power to president, because from when Tokayev came to the power, one of the first his amendments was the president of the country shouldn't member of any political parties. So it means that Tokayev is not member of any existing political parties. So at one point it will help to create a balance between presidential power and the parliamentary power. So therefore, I think whatever comes as a result of the Kurultai election, it will not strengthen presidential power subsequently, but as a result of this election, Kazakhstan will get a new political future We call them a vice president, the first one. The second one, we also have new political institution, which is Halk Kenyesi. This is a different institutions, but at some point it's similar to the Kurultai. So in general, the result of the Kurultai election will not destabilize the balance of power between parliament and the presidential power.
Thank you. That was Nubulat Nishambayev, professor at the Turan University from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.
Now, Washington and Ottawa are trading threats, tariffs, and sharp words, putting one of the world's biggest trading relationships under new pressure. Now, both governments face a difficult choice: return to the negotiating table or risk a deeper economic confrontation.
The United States and Canada are facing a sharp escalation in their trade dispute after talks aimed at resolving tensions collapsed late Friday. US President Donald Trump has accused Canada of seeking the benefits of being a US state without actually being one, while defending new tariffs on Canadian goods. Washington has announced 50% tariffs on around $20 billion worth of Canadian imports, effective immediately. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has described the move as a miscalculation aimed at hurting and dividing Canada. He said the two countries were now in a trade war, adding that Canada had been attacked and would respond accordingly. The latest escalation follows what had appeared to be promising negotiations earlier in the week. Both sides now accuse the other of making unacceptable last-minute demands. Trump's latest comments also revive his repeated calls for Canada to become America's 51st state, a proposal firmly rejected by Canadian leaders and widely criticized across the country. US Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said Canada would be foolish to think it could win a trade war with the United States. He warned Canada could face serious economic damage and said Carney would likely return to talk soon.
Now, over in Africa, at least 30 people have been killed in Guinea after a major rubbish dump collapsed onto a residential area in the capital of Conakry. Authorities say heavy rains triggered the landslide early on Sunday, burying multiple homes under tons of waste.
Search and recovery operations are underway in Conakry in Guinea, where authorities say at least 30 people have been killed after a major landfill collapsed. Emergency crews and local volunteers are using bulldozers to clear the debris and locate missing residents. The disaster occurred around 2 a.m. following torrential rain. A large section of the rubbish dump gave way, pushing directly into homes built alongside the site.
At 2 a.m. we were sleeping when we heard a loud noise. The first ones out, there were 4 or 5 people from the family who went out to see what had happened outside. Suddenly, we saw the first break. This time, the second wave came. That is what knocked us over, pushed the house, and it fell.
The Red Cross and civil protection agencies were deployed to coordinate the emergency response. While rescue teams have managed to pull survivors from the wreckage, officials are managing a high number of casualties.
There are around 30 dead. The bodies have been taken to Donka Hospital and we now have 22 injured. What we must be thankful for is that civil protection found many people under the rubble, bringing out 22 people who are truly injured. For the other bodies, the search continues.
The disaster highlights long-standing safety concerns surrounding the open-air dump. Just days before the collapse, Guinea's government announced plans to permanently close the landfill, citing severe risks during the rainy season. Authorities had scheduled the waste to be relocated outside the capital, but the site remained fully operational when the landslide occurred.
All right, after the break, we'll look at more stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching A News. Now, Turkey is strengthening its trade ties with Islamic countries, with exports showing continued growth in key markets. Trade has increased across several nations, including Egypt, Libya, Syria, and Jordan, as Ankara looks to expand its presence in these markets and further boost exports in the coming years.
Turkey's trade with member countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, continued to grow in the first 7 months of this year. According to the Turkish Trade Ministry, Turkey's exports to OIC member states reached $41.5 billion between January and July. That's up $345.7 million, or 0.8% compared with the same period last year. Total foreign trade with OIC countries also increased by 2.2%, reaching $69.2 billion. The OIC brings together 57 member states and represents around a quarter of the world's population. Turkey is now seeking to further expand its commercial ties with these markets. Under its strategy for developing exports with OIC members, the government aims to increase the share of Islamic countries in Turkey's total exports from the current 27% to 30% by 2028. The strategy identifies 21 priority markets, including Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Morocco, and Algeria. Several OIC markets also recorded particularly strong increases in Turkish exports this year. Egypt led the growth, with exports reaching $2.8 billion, up $522.2 million year on year. Exports to Libya rose by $438.5 million to $2.2 billion, while exports to Syria increased by $296.8 million to $2.1 billion. Exports to Jordan also climbed, reaching $1.3 billion, an increase of $227.5 million. The Turkish Trade Ministry says strengthening ties with OIC markets remains a key part of the country's broader export strategy, with the government targeting a larger share of these markets in Turkey's overall foreign trade by 2028.
Now, Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan are taking their strategic partnership to a new level. It's after President Ilham Aliyev's state visit to Tashkent brought a new treaty on internal friendship and fresh plans to boost trade, investment, and regional connectivity.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev held talks in Tashkent on Sunday during Aliyev's state visit to Uzbekistan, setting new targets for trade, investment, and regional cooperation. The two leaders met at the Kuksaroy state residence following an official welcome ceremony. Speaking at the third meeting of the Supreme Interstate Council, Mirziyoyev said relations between Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan had reached a historic high.
I have been informed that out of $500 million, approximately $160 million have already been allocated. Naturally, I believe we will utilize these funds soon and define new avenues of cooperation. I must also mention that Azerbaijan has such formats of cooperation with various countries. However, I would say that the most efficient and results-oriented fund is precisely the Uzbekistan-Azerbaijan Investment Fund.
The two presidents signed a treaty on eternal friendship, further strengthening ties between the two countries. The leaders adopted a roadmap aimed at raising annual bilateral trade to $1 billion. Mirziyoyev said trade between the two countries had tripled over the past 5 years.
At the heart of our relations lies a shared civilizational code, common historical roots, centuries-old friendship, unbreakable spiritual values, and similar culture and traditions. It is this deep-rooted bond that makes our relations solid and invulnerable to external conditions.
They also discussed expanding joint projects, with the current investment portfolio exceeding $5 billion across sectors including energy, industry, construction, agriculture and finance. Transport cooperation was also high on the agenda, including plans for a joint Caspian shipping fleet and expanded transit routes.
And Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev and First Lady Mariban Aliyeva have visited some of Bukhara's most important landmarks as part of the second day of President's official visit to Uzbekistan, accompanied by Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev and First Lady of Uzbekistan. The leaders and their families visited the historic Ismail Samani Mausoleum and the Ark Fortress. Dating back to the 4th century BCE, the fortress is more than 2,000 years old and now houses the Bukhara State Museum Reserve. Now, Afghanistan's authorities say they will not allow their territory to be used against neighboring Tajikistan following another deadly incident along the two countries' border. Tajik authorities say 2 Afghan nationals were killed after illegally crossing the frontier and becoming involved in an armed confrontation with border forces. Tamim Bahis has more.
The Afghan government is playing down concerns of a wider confrontation with its neighbor Tajikistan. Afghanistan official spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says recent activity along the border was linked to smuggling and was now under control. He says the incident didn't amount to military clashes or a serious security threat. Mujahid assured its neighbor that Afghan territory will not be allowed to be used against Tajikistan. His comments follow a statement from Tajikistan's State Committee for National Security, which says 2 Afghan nationals were killed after allegedly illegally entering Tajik territory. Tajik authorities accuse the men of drug trafficking and say they resisted border forces. Officials say weapons and around 17 kilograms of hashish were recovered. The incident comes amid heightened security concerns along the more than 1,300-kilometer border between the two countries. Earlier this month, a woman was killed in Tajikistan by gunfire linked to fighting on the Afghan side of the border, prompting a formal protest from the capital, Dushanbe. Meanwhile, Tajik authorities have also reported several armed encounters with suspected Afghan drug smugglers this year. So, while Kabul says the latest incident is under control, cross-border trafficking and the risk of further armed incidents remain significant concerns for Tajikistan. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, News.
Now, Pakistan is looking to strengthen its trade and energy links with Persian Gulf markets as the disruption around the Strait of Hormuz continues. Miriam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan is considering adding container ships to its national fleet as disruption around the Strait of Hormuz raises costs for exporters. Pakistan National Shipping Corporation (PNSC) says it is considering acquiring or chartering 3 to 5 feeder vessels. Each would carry between 1,100 and 2,000 containers. But there is no firm timeline yet. PNSC says it will announce details of the expanded regional services in the future. The move comes as freight costs have surged. For Pakistani mango exporters, shipping a refrigerated 40-foot container to Persian Gulf markets now costs up to $8,500. Last year, it cost as little as $1,000. Now exporters estimate mango shipments have fallen by about 50%. However, overall exports have been resilient. Pakistan exported $1.94 billion to GCC states between January and July, up to 2.1% from a year earlier. The disruption is also raising concerns over energy security. Pakistan State Oil says it is exploring wider cooperation with Kuwait Petroleum Corporation in fuel products, refining, storage, terminal shipping and logistics. For Pakistan, the disruption is putting a pressure on 2 critical links with the Persian Gulf, moving its exports and securing the energy supplies that keep its economy running. Mariam Sa, News, Islamabad.
All right, that's the news for this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.